Welcome to Textile Update, the podcast where we can share our passion for textiles, fibers, and yarns. This is Gwendolyn Hustvedt.
This is the second of two podcast episodes where I look specifically at regenerated fibers, which are manufactured fibers that use naturally occurring polymers. In this episode, we move on from the sometimes laundry debacle that is rayon to talk about some other regenerated cellulose-based fibers, including acetate, which is a modified cellulose fiber. I ended the podcast about rayon, which is a regenerated fiber, so manufactured from naturally occurring polymers, but the fiber itself is not naturally occurring. I ended on kind of a harsh note because it really does make me angry when I think that consumers are being cheated out of something that belongs to them, which is the use of their previous experience with rayon products when people are allowed to call the rayon products something different, some made-up name. That implies that the fiber is environmentally friendly, or that implies that the fiber has all of these properties it doesn't really have, and is probably an attempt to hide the fact that the fiber is actually the exact opposite of environmentally friendly, and that it has really poor, especially dimensional stability. It's also going to pill like crazy, and it's just weaker. So, kind of makes me unhappy when I think about customers being cheated. But another thing that makes me unhappy about the rayon from bamboo scandal is that there are other companies that have invested millions of dollars in researching how to make the production of regenerated cellulose fibers more environmentally friendly. And that their thunder totally got stolen by these people that just slapped this made-up fiber name on rayon. And so people had worked hard to make an actually environmentally more friendly regenerated cellulose fiber, and nobody knows about it. So today we're going to talk about lyocell. Lyocell is the generic legally allowed name for fibers that are made from cellulose. So technically they would fit the definition of rayon, right? No more than 15% of the hydrogen or hydroxyl groups have been substituted, which is the Federal Trade Commission definition. But the innovators who created the fiber we call lyocell did the right thing. They approached the Federal Trade Commission and said, we think the story behind our fiber, we think that the properties of our fiber are different enough that it needs a different generic fiber name to help consumers understand what to expect. Because the point of labeling the fiber isn't to benefit the designer, it isn't to benefit the manufacturer, it isn't to benefit the polluter behind the original source of the pulp. It's to benefit the consumer who's making a decision. So, lyocell is the legal allowed name for this fiber, which is different than rayon. And that's because of several factors. First of all, it does just have a different cross-section, right? So it looks a bit different. It's smoother, right? So just on the face of it, if you look at it under a microscope. But this generic fiber developed in the 90s, right, is solvent spun. It's dry spun, not wet spun, right? That's the big difference. It's something consumers wouldn't know, right? You can't tell when you look at a product like, ooh, how is this spun? I'm asking the sleeve of a jacket in my closet, Well, I'm guessing it was not spun since it's polyester, right? But you wouldn't know just looking at it, right? The producers of this innovative method wanted a different generic name for their fiber because they wanted consumers to understand how different their fiber was. Solvent spinning means that the process used to create the fiber has been improved enough that the fiber is so strong and so stable it doesn't need the coagulating bath. It's just ready to go. It's much more comparable to the synthetic fibers that are also solvent spun. But the other really important point is that solvent spinning is much more eco-friendly than wet spinning. So when you take a bath of chemicals to coagulate the fiber, you're coagulating it by pulling out other chemicals that were in the fiber to liquefy the polymer in the first place. And so you've got two separate batches of chemicals that you now have to figure out what to do with. And I hate to say it, but given that I don't, when I talk with my friends in the eco-friendly fiber manufacturing world, they'll tell me that they haven't been able to actually visit the factories that are producing the rayon that's been mislabeled as bamboo. That they have grave concerns that there is environmental pollution related to those factories. Given that we have Superfund federal cleanup sites here in the U.S. that were former rayon manufacturing facilities, this wet spinning method produces pollution that can pollute water. And I'm a wild swimmer. I live here in San Marcos, Texas. I love going to the San Marcos River first thing in the morning, right as the sun is coming up, right? So I'll find the time of sunrise and I'll time my swim so that just as I end my swim, I can stand up out of the 72-degree water and see the rising sun. I love that, right? So the idea that somebody would just casually put pollution into a beautiful river, just kind of icks me out. So when they invented this fiber that uses the solvent method, the benefit is that the solvent evaporates from the fiber as it's hardening, right? They blow hot air on it, the solvent evaporates. The solvent is then allowed to condense, and it is recycled. So it's a closed loop system. And that means that there's way, way less pollution. Now, the company that invented this process, Lenzig in Europe, was pressured because their production is based in Europe, which has much stricter environmental laws. They're in Austria, gorgeous forests, the trees of which could be used to produce the cellulose needed to make the regenerated fiber. So rayon produced there for a long time, still produced there, but the environmental cost of the pollution of rayon is high. And so this production method was developed. And so it is actually considered eco-friendly. The solvent's reclaimed, and the fiber is, here's another important thing. The company that manufactures one version of lyocell, which is called Tencel, they commit that all of the wood used for the pulp for, as I mentioned before, probably first paper, and then the leftover pulp for the production of the fibers, that wood is Forest Stewardship Council certified. You can buy paper products that are Forest Stewardship Council certified. It means that the forest was managed in a responsible way. Clear cutting, birds weren't disturbed, right? The foresters who managed the forest attempted to engage in stewardship activity. Not perfect, okay, but it's still a type of farming. But they have standards that they're trying to meet. And you want to compare that with other claims you'll notice on the products that have been mislabeled illegally as bamboo. Occasionally they'll make a claim that the bamboo is organic, right? But because you don't need pesticides to prevent bamboo from being eaten by insects, because you don't need herbicides to prevent weeds from growing up around bamboo, it's kind of a silly claim to make. It's not like they're certifying the bamboo as organic, right, for any other reason, and it's not like they were switching, right? That's the point of an organic standard, is to like tell us that people have stopped doing something. And so Forest Stewardship Council is the certification you should be looking for products that are made from trees. And bamboo is a tree, right, essentially. And so so it would be much better to see a Forest Stewardship Council certification on those products than an organic certification. So all that said, I really feel that lyocell, that the people who invented it really followed the rules. And that's why it chaps my hide when people just come in with their made-up fiber name that they didn't ask anybody about, and aren't following the rules, and are cheating people who tried to do it the right way. I mentioned before that the cross-section of lyocell is different, right? It's round, it's smooth, but the difference that's really important is inside the fiber itself. It has a much higher degree of polymerization than the viscose produced rayon, than even the modal produced rayon. You can actually draw this fiber. Right, so it was sturdy enough to be solvent spun. It's sturdy enough to draw. It is oriented. It has crystallinity. These are properties that we see more in synthetic materials. It has a soft hand and flowing drape like we expect from regenerated cellulose materials, but the tenacity is even better than cotton. So this material is stronger, right? So if somebody were to make a claim that it is a natural fiber, at least they're saying, they're telling this thing that you're not supposed to, that isn't true, right? It isn't a naturally occurring fiber, but at least they're not deluding consumers into thinking that a fiber that is weaker than a naturally occurring fiber is natural, right? In this case, it's stronger. Here is a lyocell garment right here in my closet. And it's definitely very soft, but it will last a very long time. I now make my own clothes. So over here are all of my, I call them my one shirt. So all of my one shirts that are made from lyocell. So I use lyocell whenever I can find it. Now there's one property of lyocell that is unexpected, that kind of makes sense if we think about a fiber that's this strong. Like linen, the fiber fibrillates with abrasion. So when you crush it, it breaks apart into smaller fibers. The smaller fibers are strong, however, they are thinner, which means that the fabric then becomes softer, and it's still strong, right? So just like linen, it gets softer over time. Lyocell gets softer over time. Now, there's one downside with linen we didn't really think about that much because it's very often just sold in white or tans or grays, and in part that's because of this particular property that we've sort of stopped thinking about, but with a new fiber we had to think about. So let's say that we have I'm making a circle with my hands, right? So let's, I'm pretending I've got microscope vision on, right? So let's say that we have a lyocell fiber that's this big around, and then it fibrillates, and now I'm making two separate circles with my two hands, right? So before, if we dyed this fiber and the dye only penetrated a short distance into the surface of the dye, when it breaks in half, I now have about half of the fiber that isn't dyed, right? The surface wasn't actually exposed to the dye. And that means that the color will seem less intense because we now have an undyed surface that's being exposed. So the colors appear to dull over time, get a little grayer, right? Because the fiber is actually broken apart, the reflectance of the light changes a little bit. And so for that reason, designers who use it need to think of it like they would think of linen, that this fibrillation, which makes it softer, can cause more issues with pilling over time. But because the fiber is so strong, right, the pilling isn't the same herald of decline that it might be in a rayon product. So designers need to remember that the fiber fibrillates and that the pattern will get, the colors will get softer over time. So this lyocell shirt I have here, it's a Michael Kors. It has a snakeskin print on it, and I chose that snakeskin print specifically because I knew that it would actually look cool, right, over time if it became somewhat softer in color. So I just want to summarize, right? Viscose regenerated fibers have a serrated cross-section. The lyocell and the Cooper ammonia method of viscose, which we might see in scarves, are round, whereas the high wet modulus has an uneven cross-section. So you can see this when you look at it under the microscope. The molecular arrangement, viscose is very amorphous, whereas lyocell is up to crystalline, right? And it's oriented, which is why it has the highest tenacity. All of them have lower wet tenacity, so only cotton does that really wild thing, and that's because of the rings of fibril bundles inside the fiber that actually allow it to grip itself as when it's wet to increase its strength. So it's something only nature could have thought of or accomplish. But that means that, well, all of them are very absorbent. The amorphous arranged viscose has the highest absorbency, which is why it's great for those medical uses and hygiene products like diapers. So I'm going to just shove in the third material here. So rather than having three separate talks about the regenerated, even though we are talking about three separate materials, I think I can fit acetate into the next 5 minutes. Acetate was invented in the 20s, so you want to think about film stock because it's related to celluloid. It is very shiny, and so it is used to imitate silk. It's way less expensive to produce than silk, of course, but it's less durable. Unlike rayon, it is also solvent spun, right? So we weren't starting from nothing when we did lyocell. So the warm air evaporates the solvents are then reclaimed, and this also lowers the cost. Now, the polymer is not cellulose. The polymer has been modified in the chemistry lab so that it is a new polymer called cellulose acetate. All right, so that's why the Federal Trade Commission definition gets so specific and picky. And so specifically, the polymer is cellulose acetate. The cross-section is multi-lobal with striations similar to the viscose-produced rayon, but it is very shiny. The hand is actually described as crisp, right? It almost really does have kind of a chemical feel, and that's because the chemical feel of it is because this is the first thermoplastic fiber. So the fiber actually melts when it gets hot. And this was a new thing, melting when it gets hot, because it means that we can mold it. So actually cellulose acetate, while it can be made into fibers that can be made into apparel, was also and can also be made into lots of other things, you know, spoons and rings and combs and hair bobs, right, and bracelets. And now it has a low degree of polymerization, and it is very weak and amorphous, so it has poor tenacity, poor wet tenacity, and it only has moderate abrasion, but so inexpensive and can be heat set with things like pleats and other things. So this is another reason why we started to see some really cool styles in the 20s. Another really kind of cool thing about acetate is that it's hydrophobic. And so this is a new thing. We never had a hydrophobic fiber before. This meant that we had a lot of challenges. We hadn't invented hydrophobic dyes yet. So when we try to use the sorts of dyes we would use with rayon or with cotton or linen, they didn't quite work as well. And so we actually had to develop the first hydrophobic dye called a disperse dye. Interestingly, acetate is very commonly used in what I'll call the bridal industrial complex, that special kind of almost organized crime that is products being sold to people for the most important day of their lives. So for your bridesmaid's dress, if the person who claims to be a really good friend gets sick to this, several $100 monstrosity on you that you will never be able to wear again because it's so poorly styled, the goal of the garment is to make the bride look good by making you look bad. That this particular product is specially dyed because that's one of the things we do with the wedding party. But the dispersed dyes can have a problem with what's called fume fading. Kind of a new thing we didn't know about until we invented cars, and we invented this dye, and it turns out the ozone from car exhaust can cause the dye to change colors and fade. So what an adventure, right? In the 20s, I get so excited when I think about people inventing all of these fibers. Because the solvent used to produce acetate is acetone, if you're wearing a special day dress that the person who claims is your friend has sticked on you for several $100s in order to make you look bad, please be careful. Don't do your nails or use nail polish anywhere near the dress. Now, if you're one of the poor brides who has had a quote unquote silk dress that turns out to actually be acetate, you can test this by trying to burn it. If it smells like barbecue when you're burning it, it's silk. If it smells like chemicals when you're burning it, it's not. Don't burn your wedding dress. I mean, a swatch that you asked for because you wanted to check the color, right? Then it's important to know that you want to be careful with acetone around the product. I honestly don't have a lot of sympathy for brides anymore. I was a tailor for a long time, and I would tell people who called and asked about whether or not I would alter their dress for their special day, that there were people who really specialized in that and really loved working with brides, and that I could recommend some for them to talk to. If you were already my customer, of course, I would help you with your special day by guiding you towards a gown that was actually made of beautiful silk. That would give me a wonderful experience altering it. You buy a dress that's and that's quote designed by Disney style, right? The big princess style. Those garments are actually really shoddily made on the inside, so they're very challenging to alter. We're not even going to get into the personality change that people undergo as they're planning the most special day of their lives. But it's really hard to put on a smile and provide the sycophantic level of service that brides sometimes seem to expect when the garment that they brought you is really just terrible to touch because it's, quote, crisp. Wow. Sorry about that. Just, had a couple of bad experiences with a dress that was glued together. All right. So that ends our conversation about regenerated fibers.